Hello, this is SPED 612, Week 4, Instruction and Planning. We're going to be focusing this lecture on structured teaching, looking at what a classroom structure should look like or successful components of a structured teaching classroom for those students who typically we would consider our center-based classrooms for lower functioning students with ASD. Structured teaching is based off of a model that came out of the University of North Carolina called Project TEACH. TEACH stands for Treatment and Education of Autistic and Related Communication Handicapped Children. So it's TEACCH. The theory behind the TEACH program, the program was originally developed for children with autism and was also used with kids with other disabilities. But it was really a structured environment where they found effective, where students were able to learn and become more independent. So as your slide says, the strategies and techniques used are really used to meet the needs of each individual student within the classroom. The structured teaching is really based on the strengths and interests of each individual student, because the more that we can focus on the strengths and interests, the more motivated they're going to be to learn and be independent. And visual strategies and structure are a huge priority. The more that they can anticipate, the more that they can be successful. In addition to focusing on students' strengths and their interests, other strategies that are used in structured teaching are listed on your slide. Applied behavior analysis, and there's a reading that goes along with that. Visual strategies, positive behavior supports, communication instruction, social skills instruction, and sensory integration. It's important for all of these things to be used within the structured teaching setting so that the students that have severe needs can be successful and learn the skills and routines that they need. In order for students to be successful, there need to be clear expectations within the classroom. Students need to be able to understand where they should be and when they should be there. What should they do when they are where they should be? And when they're there, how do they do what they're expected to do? If students understand all of that, they can be successful. Independence is encouraged and through all of these things. If they know the answers to the questions above, where should I be? What should I do? How do I do this? If they can understand that, or if they can process through themselves or have steps that they can follow, then independence is increased, which is our ultimate skill and goal. Structured teaching classrooms really revolve around four main components, and those four components are listed: the physical organization, daily schedules, individual work systems, and visual structure. We'll talk about those in detail over the next couple of slides. Physical organization of the classroom is the first main important part in regard to structured teaching and setting up your classroom. We really need to be purposeful about the way that we set up our classrooms. It really needs to be organized, and where everything is placed, it needs to be meaningful. And that can be really difficult sometimes because of limitations that we have in regard to where our rooms are, or how big our room is, or what we have access to depending on our school. But whatever space you're given, it's important to be meaningful. It's really important to be purposeful about where the furniture is located in regard to desks or sensory furniture, where work areas are located, and where the teaching materials are located. All areas within the classroom really need to be clearly defined. So areas and activities within those specific areas need to relate to one another. So the example on your slide is only sensory activities should happen in the sensory area. So, if you are strapped for space, it can be really easy to say, okay, you're gonna do your work job in the sensory area. Well, that's gonna be confusing to the student because they don't necessarily know how to compartmentalize, this is the sensory area or this is my work area. That can be confusing to them, which then again is gonna cause confusion on where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing here? So making sure that only doing specific activities related to that area in that area. Access to schedules need to be easy, and modes of communication, whether that be PECs or communication devices or schedules, all of that should be in a consistent space where it's very easy for students and other staff within the room to locate. And the arrangement of the classroom needs to allow for adults in the classroom to supervise all students, preferably at once. So if you were able to stand up in the room, you'd be able to see everyone. There's not barriers blocking. That's just for safety. Minimal distractibility. So making sure that our students are on task and doing what they're supposed to be doing, not being distracted by other students or other activities or things on the walls, sensory issues. And the other aspect to think about is that you want to make transition within the room as easy and independent as possible. So again, our ultimate goal for our students, especially our low functioning students, is to increase their independence and their work skills. And physically organizing your classroom and being purposeful and meaningful about it will really help increase their independence. This slide shows a map of an autism classroom. Just kind of shows the different areas. It might be a little bit hard to read, but if you go to that website, right above it, it says theautismhelper.com. This is a young lady who is an autism teacher. She's very insightful, has a lot of good resources. There's also a link at the top of this slide, and I'd like you to take a couple minutes to click on that link, or you might have to copy and paste it into a browser. But this gives it's actually the video of this layout of this classroom, and so it's a really good 6-minute video. Go ahead and take some time to watch that before you move on. As I said before, it's hard being able to look at our physical organization of our classroom when we don't have much say in what kind of classroom we receive. Ideal classrooms for structured teaching would have the following types of areas: a group work area where you can work with all of your students or small groups of students at a time, individual workstations where students can be working on individual tasks, a sensory area, and then also another area for schedules and communication devices or whatever that may be. And then, if you have the room, you can break these things apart into even more. For example, the individual workstations, if you had enough room and you could break it into a math station or a reading and writing station, that would be great. If you don't have the room, then setting up a couple of workstations at a time so that at least a couple of students could be doing individual work, maybe while you're working with a small group or while other students are doing other activities, having a sensory break, doing other things around the school, things like that. But ideally, it would be great to have these 4 things in your structured teaching classroom. As most of us know, visuals are key to working with students or people with autism. Visual structure within a structured teaching classroom is crucial. Visuals should accompany verbals and tasks that are being completed. Visuals can provide meaning to the task and help students make connections. Visuals can be incorporated in all the other aspects within the structured teaching classroom, including the physical environment. As we talked about, when you set up the physical organization of your classroom, things should have visuals with them, pictures, and that will make the area or the designated task more meaningful for that student if they need the picture in order to make that connection. We'll be talking about visuals and how to incorporate all of those with the other parts within the structured teaching, such as the work systems and as well as the daily schedules. Lost it for a sec. So we'll keep going with this. Daily schedules are important for students with autism, and this just goes right along with the visuals. The daily schedules are going to be able to provide predictability for the student. Students with autism really like the routine, they thrive on it, they perform well when they have a routine, they know what to expect, and they know what's expected of them. So the daily schedules will provide that. You're able to use words or pictures just depending on the needs of the student. In lower functioning classrooms where students can't read, that's where you're going to use your pictures. If you have higher functioning students outside of the structured teaching classroom, you can use worded schedule, but again, the schedules are going to be key. There's two main types of schedules within the structured teaching classroom, and that would be the daily schedule for the entire class. So that's kind of if you think about elementary school, like a kindergarten class. The teacher usually has the whole schedule for the day listed on the board so the students know what are we doing, where are we doing it, when are we doing it. That's the same with this. There's kind of an example on your slide. I really like that example. I'm not quite sure why the next is above. Maybe they're going out of order. To me, it would make sense to start at the top and work your way down, but I really like that next arrow. So it has the now we're doing this, next we're doing this, so they're able to predict what's going to happen. And then you can also see a picture. The other type of schedule are the individual student schedules. So you might have a daily schedule, but then within that daily schedule, individual student schedules may vary as well, depending on what workstation they're at, if they need therapy or service from another person, or if they need a specialized sensory break. All of those need to be taken into account. Again, it's good if we can increase our independence of our students, and the more we can get our students to be part of the schedule, if we're able to let them plan their schedule or have choices in making their schedule, that builds on the flexibility of the student and the independence in being able to determine what they're going to do for the day. Individual work systems are the last component that we're going to be talking about in regard to a structured teaching classroom. Individual work systems are going to be the work that individual students are doing. So these systems are created or are completed normally at the individual workstations within the room. The level of the work can be varied depending on the student's strengths and needs. So the good thing about individual work systems is that exactly that. You can tailor it to whatever the individual student is working on because the students within the classroom are going to be at varying levels. The downside to that is that that can oftentimes create a lot of prep and work for us, but usually, if you create those, you can keep them forever. The type of work that can be targeted within the work systems, it's awesome if we can target interests for the students, high interest things, but again, that's going to be creating more prep for us, but if it's of interest to them, they're much more likely to want to complete it, and that also reduces the behaviors. Types of work systems that have been used in the past, some ideas, working on fine motor, so maybe working with your occupational therapist to see if your student has needs in that area. Academics can range from reading, writing, math within those stations. Being able to follow directions, so just having simple tasks and following directions, that's going to prepare our students for some of those job training skills. Then also going along with that, just functional skills that our students need to be working on. And that could be incorporated into the following directions. It could be incorporated into the academics. So for example, functional skills, knowing the days of the week in which order they come in. That could also be tied into reading. But working on any of those things within the work system is going to be beneficial for the student. Work in these systems should be meaningful. I think a lot of times it can be easy to just continue to give the students the same stuff day after day after day, and they get really good at it. But that's not the point of the work systems because they're not gaining any skills. The work systems should be based, the majority of them, to reinforce the IEP goals that they're working on. And it should be to be maintaining where they're at. When we're working on new IEP goals, again, we need to be teaching skills and practicing skills with students. So you can't just expect to give students work at an independent and individual workstation and have the student increase their skills and meet their IEP goal that way. That's not the intent of it because you need to be teaching the student the new skills that they need to be working on. But being able to maintain past skills that they've done, or if you've taught a skill and they have been able to do it with you successfully, transitioning that skill into their individual workstation will be key into mastering that IEP goal. As I just talked about, students may need to be taught how to do the activities first, but that's where we want to transition from teacher teaching, working with teacher, to working on that independently in their individual workstation. Students may need to be taught the concept of finished and what that looks like. This can be incorporated, the visuals need to be incorporated with this as well. First then schedules or a list of 1, 2, 3 or first, second, third, fourth, fifth, but you really need to be aware that the student also needs to know when they're done. That goes back to our questions that we talked about before. Where should I be? What should I do when I get there? How do I do it? And then also thinking about, how do I know when I'm done? Students with autism really need to be able to see that end in sight. And depending on the level of student, they have one work system they work on. Maybe students that have more tolerance for workstations can work, up to 5, 10, I don't know how many they could do. But again, you need to think it needs to be meaningful. Once they are done though, giving them that visual that I am done, that's going to be key. And then what should they do when they're done? So that may mean that staff in the classroom have chosen an activity for them to do when they're done and have given them, there's a picture or a word letting them know what to do when done. Maybe that means that the student at the beginning of the day gets to choose from choices. This is what I'm going to do when I'm done. Having them have that input is going to be more meaningful for the student if they can choose what they do when they're done. It can also give them something to look forward to if they know they chose that at the beginning. Excuse me. Again, activities should be independent in these workstations, and as I said, visuals should be incorporated. This slide just shows a couple of additional resources that you may want to look into if you are teaching in a classroom where you are using structured teaching. Structured teaching principles can be used in a resource setting or a social communication class as well. Really, the structured teaching theory goes along with teaching more of what we would consider a center-based room where the students are lower functioning, but a lot of these strategies can be used with all of our students with ASD.